Trade policy, usually a snooze, right? For most people it's the kind of topic that makes your eyes glaze over, buried in jargon and endless debates. But every so often something happens that jolts everyone awake. In 2025, trade policy exploded into the spotlight, grabbing headlines and dominating conversations. The reason? A perfect storm of electric cars, global drama, and a trade plan that backfired in ways no one saw coming. The Trump administration doubled down on tariffs, determined to force companies to manufacture in America by making imports painfully expensive. The message was clear: bring jobs home or pay the price. On paper, the idea seemed straightforward: use tariffs as leverage to boost American industry. But in reality, the plan was far more complicated, and the consequences far more severe. New tariffs slammed everything from finished cars to the raw metals that build them, sending shockwaves through industries that depend on global supply chains to survive. For automotive giants like Ford and Tesla, this wasn't just another policy debate, it was an existential threat that put their entire business models at risk. Suddenly, every imported part carried a hefty new price tag, squeezing companies between soaring costs and the threat of foreign retaliation. The pressure was relentless, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. The fallout was immediate: skyrocketing expenses, global pushback, and American icons scrambling to adapt. Protests erupted and the world watched as US companies searched for a way out. This story unpacks how a bold trade plan unraveled, driving US automakers to seek refuge in Canada, where the rules and the costs suddenly looked a lot friendlier. It's a cautionary tale for our interconnected world. When you try to build walls, you might just end up trapping yourself inside, facing the very fires you hope to keep out. The 2025 tariffs hit automakers like a tidal wave. A 25% tariff on all imported cars, petrol and electric, meant higher prices for American buyers. Even neighbors weren't spared. Canada and Mexico faced the same steep tariffs. The pain went deeper, with new tariffs on steel and aluminum, key ingredients for EVs, making production even pricier. The knockout blow? A 93.5% tariff on Chinese graphite, a critical EV battery component, nearly all sourced from China. For Tesla, Ford, and their partners, battery costs soared, threatening the affordability of electric cars. Tariffs on China doubled, and more were threatened on copper and EU imports. The result, a hostile, unpredictable business climate, pushing automakers to consider moving operations abroad. The cost of building a car in America was now artificially and painfully high. With costs spiraling out of control and profit margins shrinking, Tesla and Ford found themselves at a crossroads. The global auto industry was facing unprecedented challenges: rising material prices, supply chain disruptions, and a wave of new tariffs that threatened to upend decades of business strategy. Their solution? Shift key operations to Canada, a move driven by survival, not sentiment. Canada offered a lifeline: lower energy costs, a skilled workforce, and crucially, a way to sidestep the harshest US trade barriers. By relocating battery and component assembly north of the border, they could dodge punishing US tariffs on imported materials. This allowed them to keep their supply chains flowing and avoid costly delays that could cripple production. This strategy kept costs in check and their cars competitive, both in the US and globally. It also gave them access to Canada's growing electric vehicle ecosystem, which was quickly becoming a North American hub for innovation. For Ford, it was a bitter irony. After moving battery production to Michigan for US incentives, new policies forced them to look abroad again. The company had invested heavily in American jobs, only to be caught off guard by shifting regulations. The whiplash of changing government rules made long-term planning nearly impossible. Executives scrambled to adapt, knowing that a single policy change could wipe out months of careful strategy. Tesla, too, was exposed. Relying on foreign parts and batteries, the company's CFO warned early on that tariffs would hit profits hard. The risk of being locked out of critical components was simply too great to ignore. Moving to Canada became essential, not optional. It was the only way to ensure business continuity and protect their future in a rapidly changing market. It was a defensive move to shield their business from America's own trade war. In a world where policy could change overnight, companies had to be nimble and ready to pivot. Instead of boosting US manufacturing, the tariffs sent jobs and investment north. Plants that once hummed in Michigan and Ohio now sat idle, while Canadian factories ramped up production. The lesson? Capital always flows to where it's treated best. In the end, business will always chase opportunity, wherever it leads. The world didn't just watch. America's trading partners hit back. Canada slapped 25% tariffs on US goods, including American-made EVs, and even canceled a major contract with SpaceX. Ottawa made it clear, tax us, and we'll tax you. Mexico readied its own countermeasures, including matching US tariffs on Chinese goods to protect its economy. The European Union and China prepared their own lists of retaliatory actions. China, with its grip on graphite and a huge market, threatened to make life even harder for US companies. The trade war quickly escalated, turning allies into adversaries and fragmenting the global economy. American companies faced new barriers abroad, not just at home. The US had started a fire and the world was ready to pour on gasoline. Protectionism was isolating America on the world stage. The tariff storm sent US car production costs soaring overnight. Steel, aluminum, and especially Chinese graphite became dramatically more expensive, squeezing automaker profits. Companies scrambled, shifting operations to Canada, rethinking investments, and even cutting jobs. The tariffs, meant to protect American workers, ended up threatening their livelihoods. Tesla, despite building most cars in the US, was hit hard by its global supply chain. The paradox: domestic production was strong, but reliance on foreign parts became a liability. Investors panicked, Tesla's stock tumbled as costs rose and global retaliation loomed. Automakers faced pressure from every side: higher costs, new foreign taxes, and nervous shareholders. The American auto industry was now navigating a minefield of its own government's making. As if tariffs weren't enough, the U.S. axed the $7,500 federal EV tax credit in July 2025. This credit had made electric cars affordable for many families, bridging the price gap with gas vehicles. Its removal, combined with rising production costs, was a double blow to the EV market. Automakers who'd invested billions in U.S. factories for these incentives were left stranded. Hyundai and Honda had just opened or expanded plants, betting on stable policy, only to see the rug pulled out. The message to consumers: you're on your own if you want an electric car. The result? EVs became a luxury, not a mainstream option. The policy reversal shattered confidence in American industrial strategy. The clean energy dream was suddenly out of reach for most buyers. The impact was immediate. EV prices shot up, and sticker shock hit buyers hard. Families who had been saving for months, hoping to make the switch to electric, suddenly found their dreams slipping out of reach. The promise of affordable, clean transportation seemed to vanish overnight, replaced by anxiety and frustration at the dealership. Tariffs on metals, batteries, and imported cars rippled through to the final price tag. Every component, from the steel frame to the lithium in the batteries, became more expensive almost instantly. The cost increases didn't just affect luxury models. Entry-level EVs were hit just as hard, if not harder. Automakers passed these costs to consumers, pushing EVs out of reach for many. Dealerships saw more and more shoppers walk away, unable to justify the new prices. The dream of owning an electric car was now reserved for a shrinking group of buyers. A Ford Mustang Mach-E, once affordable, now costs thousands more due to pricier steel and graphite. What was once a symbol of progress and innovation became a painful reminder of how global politics can hit home. Imported EVs faced even steeper hikes. A $50,000 car could jump to over $62,500 before other costs. For many, that price difference was simply impossible to overcome, no matter how much they wanted to go green. At the same time, the $7,500 tax credit vanished, compounding the pain. Buyers who had counted on government support to make EVs affordable were left empty-handed, their budgets stretched to the breaking point. The result? EVs became unaffordable for most, and sales growth stalled. Showrooms that once buzzed with excitement now stood eerily quiet, with unsold cars gathering dust. The policies strangled the market just as it was taking off. Factories slowed production, and workers worried about their jobs as the industry's momentum faded. Consumers lost choices, automakers lost customers, and America's clean energy goals slipped away. The ripple effects were felt across the economy, from manufacturing plants to local communities. The trade plan, meant to show strength, ended up hurting everyone it was supposed to help. Instead of driving progress, it left families, workers, and the nation's future stuck in neutral. In the end, the 2025 trade plan collapsed under its own contradictions. The goal was to bring jobs home, but it drove companies and investment to Canada instead. American consumers paid more, and the chaos scared off long-term investment. Tariffs didn't reshore jobs, they rerouted supply chains and punished U.S. workers. International retaliation made it even harder for American products to compete abroad. The U.S. isolated itself, turning allies into adversaries and shrinking its export markets. The policy became a self-imposed economic sanction. The less than simplistic solutions to complex problems can backfire spectacularly. In global trade, building walls often means trapping yourself inside. The 2025 trade saga is a warning. Protectionism can destroy what it's meant to protect.